Alright, so I'm gonna attempt to make a video on how to replace the capacitor in a Tamagotchi. This video applies to pretty much all these LCD screens, you know, the not backlit ones, because they're all pretty much set up the same, like on the inside. So what you need is a soldering iron, you need, you know, your replacement capacitor. I have some here, I'll talk about it once I open up the Tamagotchi. I recommend having tweezers, you know, a screwdriver to open it up, of course a battery, and yeah, that's pretty much all you need, I think. If I miss anything, I'll probably mention it later. So anyway, we'll open it up. This one doesn't have a back screw, because most of mine just go missing. And we'll open up the back here. I also want to mention that it's probably a good idea to have some kind of cloth underneath, because to get these screws out without stripping them, you have to put some pressure on them. So you'll be pushing the front with the buttons and stuff into, you know, the table. So yeah, it's just better to have some kind of like padding so you're not damaging your... Sorry, my cat is in here and he's being crazy. But alright, so I have all the screws undone. They're kind of hard to get out, so I use like tweezers just to get them unstuck from that last bit of plastic. Jeez, I don't think I've ever opened up this Tamagotchi before, so pretty stuck. So there's one. Don't lose your screws. This might be a good idea to stick them to a magnet or something to hold on to it, hold on to them for you. And now we just very carefully open up the casing. I would probably use a guitar pick if you have one, or some kind of plastic prying tool, because it's very easy to like leave, you know, screwdriver marks in the plastic, and it just chews it up. So very carefully pop it open, and then careful not to snap the speaker wires when you open it. Sometimes these things are just so old that they're just ready to snap off. I could make a video about how to change or even replace these at some point. I'm sure I still have a Tamagotchi somewhere that doesn't have sound. But these are just solid wires, so they don't have strands in them like earbud wires, you know, like headphone wires. They're meant to be like flexible. These ones are not meant to be flexible. They're not meant to be flexed. So anyway, I will remove this reset button just so I don't mess it up or anything. And here's your capacitor. It's very small. Okay, so just for the purpose of this video, I'm just gonna purposefully make this capacitor fail. Or at least try to. I've never done this before, but I don't recommend doing this at home. Or if you do, wear safety glasses, because these things can pop. Basically, I just want to make it fail so I can show you what a failed capacitor looks like in a Tamagotchi. Because it can have all sorts of effects. You know, sometimes it'll just not even let the Tamagotchi turn on. Sometimes it'll make the screen stop working randomly, or it'll just shut off randomly. Sometimes it'll reset randomly. Sometimes it'll freeze and just beep forever until you take the battery out. Sorry, my cat's meowing. What you doing, kitty cat? Basically, the way these work, well, okay, I don't really know how they work, but capacitors hold a charge, as far as I know. It's kind of like a water tower. It just kind of holds it in there and lets it out at a specific, you know, rate. And these ones in particular are called electrolytic capacitors, which means they have electrolytic fluid inside. So, a lot of times in like just any early 2000s electronics that have these will just kind of dry up over time, or sometimes they can leak onto the board, which can cause some issues. And And yeah, it's usually the first thing to fail in something like this. So let's see if I made it fail. Oh, it does turn on. Well, dang. I was hoping it would fail. Alright, I'll try a different approach. Whoops. It's squished. What could have happened there? Oh, I hope it doesn't explode. Let's see. Boop. Oh no, it's leaking. However could this happen? Alright. Try this again. I cannot stress enough that you should not try this at home. Wow, look at all that. Anyway. Wow, it doesn't work anymore. How'd that happen? Oh my god, it works. Maybe I chose the wrong Tamagotchi to do this. On with the tutorial, I guess. I was really hoping it would act all crazy, because I've had one. I had a V4 that had a bad capacitor in it. And what it would do is it would work for a second, and then the screen would turn off, and then it would let out this continuous beep, just until I took out the battery. Alright, so this is why I recommend tweezers. This will get very hot, even if you just heat up the ends here. And all you want to do is just barely touch these little blobs that it's connected to. And you want to then find out what kind of capacitor this is. I've kind of mangled it, but on here you can see it says 10 volts, 47 UF, which is like microfarad. I don't even remember what the word is, I'll be honest. So yeah, that's what you want. You want a capacitor that's rated at 10 volts and 47 UF. Also, you probably want to measure the size of this because you want a capacitor to fit in the casing. Unfortunately, the capacitors that I have are a little bit fatter, and what I did pretty much is I just get a caliper, or you can even use like a ruler if it has millimeters on it, and then you can measure, you know, the width, the length, all that stuff. And yeah, I'll get a new capacitor here. This one is rated 47 UF. This one's actually 16 volts, but I think that's okay. Like, even if it's off by a little bit, as far as the voltage goes, that's fine. I haven't had any problems with these before. And if you don't know capacitors, which I'm just assuming, you know, I'm making this video for like people who don't know electronics, these have a polarity, so it'll actually show you here that this is the negative pin, or the negative lead, and usually, even if it doesn't say it on here, usually the longer one is the positive. So what I do is, I don't know, maybe electronics, you know, technicians will probably think I'm crazy, but I just take some flat nose pliers or something, even the tweezers could work, and just straighten these out, because they're not shaped in a convenient way to fit into this casing. And you know, to reach these little solder blobs here. Let's see if I can zoom in. Alright. Yeah, you want them exactly here. You don't want them touching anything else. And actually on the board, if you look, it'll tell you, in most cases I think, it'll tell you this side is negative, this side is positive. So you know which orientation you need to put it. So I've got the negative side on this side, and I'm just gonna measure. I might even check in the casing. Might be a little bit too fat for this casing, but I'll measure, and then I'll cut. I might even move it over a little bit. Then I'll cut these leads right where the blobs are. And they're very soft, so they won't snap off and fly across the room. You kind of have to flex them a little bit to break them. Although, don't flex it too much because you could ruin the seal on this side. Like, because I think this is just plastic right here. But yeah, so negative side this way. This is very small, so you don't have to do a whole lot. You don't even really need that good of an iron to do this. You just need one that gets hot at the tip. I know, like, I have a iron at home that the tip is falling apart in some places, but it has like one little spot where it still gets hot. So just dab a little bit of solder onto your iron here. Make sure you're oriented right. And I may have cut these leads a little bit too short. But you just heat up this solder. Make sure to heat up the lead as well. And I just kind of push it on there. I'll do it to this side too. Oh yeah, these leads are too short. Whoops. This one doesn't have enough solder holding on to it, so I'll just get a little bit more on the tip. And I'll continue just holding this in place so it doesn't move around. Or, you know, I can control where it goes at least. But yeah, you want like a solid connection there, which I do not have. Whoops. Yeah, maybe measure twice, cut once. Is that how the saying goes? I really take YouTubers for granted with their camera angles. Because there's no way I can do this without having my hand in the way. Ugh, it's too low. I want to move it up a little bit. There we go. But yeah, make sure your solder blobs don't touch each other, because that'll just short out your capacitor. Also, you don't want to keep your iron on it for too long because it can just boil the fluid inside and it'll just break it. So this is kind of hot from me heating it up too much. And I don't recommend moving it, like bending it around after you have it soldered on, but it doesn't really fit in the case because of how fat it is and the way I have it installed in there. It's kind of sticking out. So I'll just like push it down a little bit. Again, trying to make sure not to bust this end here. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately this one might be a little bit too fat for the casing, so I'll have to like kind of smash it in there, which can cause problems. But yeah, that's the only one that I could find that would fit in there. So I'll just snap it back together. Yeah, there's a bit of a gap there. But we'll test it, see if it works. And it does. So then you just continue with what you're doing. Some other things, sometimes the clock can fail, and you know, usually what that does is it just doesn't let time progress. Like the clock will just be stuck where it is forever. So your clock is right here, this little cylinder right here. It's called a crystal oscillator because it has a tiny quartz crystal in it that oscillates, and that's how it keeps time, because it's at a certain frequency. And so it's the same process. I don't know if it has polarity to it, I'll be honest, because I have a roll of them here, because you buy these things in bulk, they're so cheap. And they kind of just have little leads that just stick out. There's not really like any indication of polarity. So I think they can be installed however you want, just as long as they're soldered in there correctly. Let's see, what else? I guess if anyone has any questions, just post in the comments. I'll try to answer them. At some point I will make a video about the wires and how you can actually just use earbud wires. Like if you have some old broken earbuds or something, I can show you how to just, you know, cut pieces from those and use them as speaker wires, because they flex more and they never really snap, especially when they're just in the casing. But yeah, I guess that'll be all for now. Thank you for watching. Whoops, I almost forgot. Make sure you put it back together right. Don't forget your reset button. Don't lose your reset button. That's a pain in the butt. Put this in here, however way it fits. Put it together. And you can just use your tweezers to stick these in straight. And yeah. Put it all back together and you're good to go. Another thing I want to mention is the soldering iron heat. I do have kind of a fancy iron here that has a screen that tells me the temperature. So I usually keep it at around, I don't know, 580 degrees Fahrenheit, about 308 Celsius. It might be on the hotter side of things, but that's just for the sake of melting the solder faster. You just don't want to hold it on there for too long, otherwise it'll start burning stuff. But, you know, if it's too high and you go to melt some solder, you might find that it sputters. Like, it's a little bit aggressive. Like, it'll melt it immediately, but sometimes it'll make the flux inside of it boil, kind of like when you're cooking bacon and the, you know, oil jumps out of the pan and lands on you. This is the same kind of deal. Most solder has flux in it, which is a type of acid. It just helps the solder flow more easily and stick to stuff. But yeah, when it lands on you, even if it's just a tiny little bit, it's enough to make you jump. But yeah, just things to keep in mind when you're soldering anything. But you also don't want your iron to be too low temp, because if it's, you know, not high enough to melt your solder, you might find yourself, you know, holding the iron on there for a really long time. It's not doing anything, or you want to push harder on it. It's not really recommended to push on anything with very much force. So yeah, it's just find a good in-between. If you have a roll of solder wire, then you can, even if you don't have an iron that has like a temperature gauge on it, you can find your good in-between spot.